Oh, perfect. I'll just maybe say hello to everyone in turn. So I'm super delighted. Hello, everyone. I'm Caitlin. I'm the artistic director of Theater Works. And it's my delight to join you on this May evening with Pam Chaddon, who is the muse in an Iliad, which is why she joins us here today, as well as an artist of many facets. I'm delighted to see you all here this evening. And so what we'll do is I'll read Pam's bio. So you can, if you don't already know about Pam, you can hear a little bit more about Pam. And then I'll start with a question about Pam's origins in the arts, which I love to start with. And then we'll talk a little bit about an Iliad. We'll talk about Pam's work as an artist, and Pam has even potentially teased us with the idea that there might be a bit of demonstration as well, which will be really exciting. Lovely folks, can I just, before I read Pam's bio, can I get a quick, who has had an opportunity to see an Iliad already? Wonderful. Almost everyone. So there's still this weekend, if you'd like to join us outdoors, or also a wonderful streamed production. We have both things available. So at the ends, we can make sure to, for those of you who haven't seen an Iliad yet, but if you still want that info, we can get it to you so you can see the fruits of what we're talking about. All right. So Pam is excited for her first production with Theater Works. Pam has been part of the musical team at the Fine Arts Center for The Bridges of Madison County, Hands on a Hard Body, Fun Home, A New Brain, and Dogfight. The Colorado Springs Conservatory is the last 5 years at the Mezzanine, as well as for myriad opera, ballet, and choral collaborations throughout Colorado Springs. So we got Pam's theater bio there. As well, Pam is a passionate advocate for the arts. She currently serves as orchestra manager and associate principal cellist for the Chamber Orchestra of the Springs and Baroque cellist for Colorado Springs Early Music Ensemble Parish House Baroque. In Pam's free time, she enjoys researching underperformed composers, as well as exploring innovative ways to reach diverse corners of our community through music. And in an Iliad, she would like to thank her art, music, and theater-loving children for their support and inspiration. And maybe we'll ask you a few questions about your family and their excitement and passion for theater as we go along as well. So Pam, the first question that I always love to hear from our artists who join us for this kind of thing is, can you share with us your origin story in the arts? And because you are principally an artist of music and then also a theater artist, can you maybe share both, how you came to music and then maybe how theater has crept in along the way as well?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been sort of thinking about meeting with you tonight and this talk. I thought, how am I going to cross this intersection with theater? I've always considered myself a very serious cellist, and have spent most of my life being a very serious cellist and working. But I have a love affair with theater that goes back that I hadn't really thought about until this production in a lot of ways. Both of my parents were sort of involved in amateur community theater. My sister actually majored in costume design in theater. And I was actually, when I graduated from high school, my best friend and I, the first thing we did was get in the car and drive to New York to go see Broadway. And so I have this love affair with theater. I actually have in high school, because they were in need of somebody to play piano for several theater productions, ended up playing piano for my high school theater. And then there was one production of The Music Man where they needed someone to play piano, but they needed them on stage. And so I ended up playing piano on stage for that. And so, I was very much, all of my friends were all in the orchestra and we were all in the choir and we were all in theater. So I realized in this time that like my love affair with theater goes way, way back. And then, but again, I was always a very, very serious cellist, studying cello, practicing cello, pursuing being a professional cellist. That's what I loved and wanted. But this theater thing was always in the side. And I realized something I wanted to share with you, Caitlin, which I thought was really interesting that I hadn't thought about in years, was when I first started college, my cello professor he knew how much I guess that I like to create music and had this other things that I liked, but and I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce it correctly, but it was Leonardo Shapiro. I was in Baltimore, and the Shalico Experimental Theater Company had come to Theater of Nations in Baltimore, and he knew the violinist who was writing the music for this production about Van Gogh called The Yellow House, and she wanted someone else to collaborate on it, and he recommended me, and I actually did. I collaborated on that whole production, and I didn't realize at 18 years old what a gift that was. It was just like, I just showed up and did it, and whatever. But now I look back and think, what an amazing gift that was, that I had that opportunity. And then somewhere else along the line in my life in college, I got recommended to be part of I had friends again who were in theater, and they were doing a show of monologues called Talking With by Jane Martin, who really is I think a pseudonym for many people, and they wanted incidental music to be in between each of these monologues about different women. And I said, oh yeah, sure, I'll do it. And I wrote the music for it. But again, at 18 and 19 years old, I didn't really think about it a lot, And then life just sort of took other directions, family and children and jobs and orchestra jobs and things, and hadn't really thought about it in a long time until I moved here, and then got asked to do a couple productions with the Fine Arts Center. I'm like, I love this so much. I love the theater so much, so that's sort of my love affair with theater. But I've again always have been very much of a serious cellist, studying cello, thinking myself as a cellist.
So when you approach your work, and I'm just going to keep using the phrase serious cellist, even if we mean it a tiny bit ironically, we shall use it that way.
Okay.
When you approach your work outside of the theater, with the chamber orchestra or with the Parish House, do you think of these as sort of two completely different things? Your work as a cellist within those ensembles and those orchestras versus your work that you've done in theater, or do you think of them along a spectrum? And if a spectrum, what would you say how would you talk about that spectrum?
That's an interesting question.
I know.
I don't think of it. I just think of it as music. I've always said music is like breathing to me. I don't really know how to function without it. It's the air that I breathe and the blood in my veins. That's kind of always been my mantra for what music meant to me. So everything I do, it sort of comes from the same place. Doing this production has been way beyond anything I ever imagined I would be doing. So I'm trying to tap into those same things. But no, I guess in all of my work with Parish House, with the chamber orchestra and other orchestras I played with a piano trio that I played with, I think it all comes from the same place. I try to understand what the composer's trying to say. With through music, in terms of rhetorically, almost like a language, so like an actor would use the written word to say something. I think of music that way, that there is a language and that you're speaking and you're trying to say something artistically.
I love that. I love where you began with the music is like breathing, and then this idea of what is someone wanting to say and to communicate. I'm so excited about that. So when you first began to collaborate with TheaterWorks on an Iliad, at the beginning of the process, what were the tools and the texts available to you? And what were you encountering on the page, and maybe how did that differ from what you might have encountered, or how did that overlap with what other processes the work you might have encountered?
So for this process, so when you had first contacted me, I really didn't know what to expect at all. I thought, is this just a score? Is this just, it's incidental music? I hadn't had a chance to touch base with Jane, and you all weren't really sure how this was going to look at that point. And there was a lot of questions, and I was really open to that. I was like, well, I'll just go with the flow and we'll see where it goes. But the one thing I thought was really important was that Max sent me the whole script. And that is actually where I started. I actually had the script before I had Anthony's score, I think. Max had sent me the script and I read it and I just fell in love with the script. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is just such beautiful writing, just so, the story, I mean, you've seen it up there. The tears that come at the end for me were so organic. I mean, we were in rehearsal and I'm just like bawling my eyes out because I can't stop. And so I love the text. And then when I got the score, it was, I couldn't figure out I couldn't put it together. I couldn't figure out how to put it together. And that's where I had to really go to Jane, because so much was not on the page. Jane had been, Jane and Anthony are married, and Anthony I think she worked really closely with him on what he wrote. And he also wrote it for her sensibilities and her techniques, and also for playing an acoustic cello in a certain space. And so once I started to connect with her and we met, then I started to see what, and she would talk in images of what images, like she's, well, here, this is Athena's theme. And so this is where Athena comes in. So I'm thinking, she said, I was thinking very ethereal, and so there's so many things that weren't written down, techniques that she was using. And that evolved. Of course, we had a very short rehearsal process. So yeah, so in a week trying to figure out how that would look on an instrument that I had never played in my life.
Yes, and I want to dig into that a little bit. There's a complexity. I find what you just said, Pam, such an interesting echo of the text itself, because, and I agree that an Iliad is such a rich text, but one of the things that's really interesting about the text is that it's by Lisa Peterson and Dennis O'Hare, and Dennis O'Hare was the original performer of an Iliad, the text. And Max and Eric both went, and we visited with them in April, and they both went to the same acting school that Dennis O'Hare, the original poet, went to. And they spoke when we were together in April about how they could feel in some of the ways the text was approached, they could feel that original actor training and the inheritance of the teacher that they all shared in the way an Iliad was written, because it was written for Dennis O'Hare. And so I'm just reflecting on that echo that I hear between Eric's work with the poet, where he's inheriting a published text that was written for one very specific performer, and then how to make it his own. And the echo of what you just said, in that so much of the score was still in the sort of brain and fingers of the muse Jane Chan, who was with us in March of 2020. Yeah.
I owe her so much. We would not have been where we were at opening if it weren't for the time that she gave me, and gave me what was in her head, and what was in Anthony's head that he had passed through to her, and then how do I take that and now make it my own? Because a lot of it wasn't on paper.
Yeah. So I'm interested in sort of two ways of making it your own. One, I'm interested in hearing you reflect on just what was that process like for you of being in rehearsal and balancing wanting to honor what Jane and Anthony had already created, but wanting to bring yourself to it as well. And then also I'm interested, you mentioned at the end of what you just said, I'm constantly asking these two-part questions, Pam, so excuse me. I'm so excited. And then right at the end, you snuck in this instrument idea that Jane was playing on an acoustic cello. And you, of course, are playing, I shouldn't say, of course, you are not playing on an acoustic cello.
I'm not. And those of you who've seen it know that I'm not. So
maybe could you reflect on both on that question of honoring the original, but also making it your own, and maybe how the instruments that you were playing factored into that process for you?
So yeah, I'll start with the beginning of your question. First of all, Max and Eric are so they're just brilliant and such great collaborators and such, incredible souls. And Eric is so just so easy to read, but also not just easy to read, but he has ideas, and he'll just so gentle and generous with his ideas, and really allows you to come into what he's doing, so that to make it my own. I had such a short time frame to try and figure that out, but Max and Eric made that so easy, because they allowed me into their space. And Max kept saying, trust the process, trust me. And I didn't want to trust him, because I was really out of my comfort zone in so many ways. I really thought I was going to be sitting in the corner playing the cello, because that's what I do. I sit in a pit or in an orchestra. And, to be asked to do something like, oh, can you look at Eric? Can you respond to him? I'm like, I'm not an actress, And so there was that element, but he said, trust me that if I ask you to do this, that you can do it. He wrote me this beautiful note for opening night, and he just said, be brave, and you can do this. You can do this. And this is what this is what it needs. I said, okay, you trust. So the music also that way, but for the music, and specifically Eric, was allowed me into his process, which helped. I just would go with that. There's things that I'm doing that when the other iteration of the show, she was playing some things in different places a little bit differently, but we had to change it because it was a different production and a different setting and a different space. And Eric was discovering new things too. And Max was discovering new things with the new blocking. And so we went with it, and I trusted them. So they made that easy. But it was scary. So, and then the second question. So when, Max, I first started talking, the first meeting I had with Max, he said, can you come down? Can we meet? And he said, this is our space. And I said, well, you can't have an acoustic cello out here. There's no, it needs some place to bounce the sound off of, but 15, 20 degree temperature changes, weather's element, you can't do this. You have to find some. So what I really wanted to try and find was a carbon fiber cello, which can handle the elements. And I knew someone who had one, but they had left the state when the pandemic hit. And so then I started asking around and trying to figure out, well, what could I do? And our principal bass in the chamber orchestra, he also plays cello. He actually started on cello, and he plays in a jazz band and he does a lot of different cross-genre collaborations. And he said, I have an electric cello. And I'm like, well, okay, but it's 5 strings. It's a 5-string. So a normal cello is going to have 4. It has 5 strings. So it's got a different placement of things. And I didn't know. I said, okay, well, so I got it from him right away just to try. And so there was a learning curve, even though it's laid out the same in terms of some things, there are a lot of things that are very different. So I'm trying to learn how to play this instrument, and also then try and figure out how to serve the text with the music, and figure out what the muse's role is. And what does this music mean? I'm not just playing incidental music. There's the music is actually a language. It's actually like almost part of the text, because it's keeping the poet going. That's what's driving the story, I guess I see as my role, is that he doesn't want to tell this story, right? He doesn't want to keep doing this. And so that's my job. So I hope that answered all your questions.
It does. You're so good at it. And now that, because you mentioned that your original thought was that you would be like hiding in a corner, because that's what usually that we maybe would like dig you a pit outside, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. A literal pit instead of a more figurative orchestra pit. And you are very much not. You were very much not in a pit. You were in fact at the apex, the highest points in the set, right? Looking down as the muse. What is that encounter with the audience been like for you now that you're sort of 2 of our 3 performance weekends in? Has there been a learning curve or an opening up about the audience? Do you think about them more or less? What's that relationship like in addition to that relationship with the poet?
Well, first of all, I love performing. I love having an audience. And one thing I miss so much this year, I miss our audience so much. I love the adrenaline of playing. When the music starts, I get in what I call my zone. And I love to play. It's everything. It's my life. But this was very different. Now, for most of the show, the lights are so bright and in my eyes, I can't see that there's an audience. So that's one thing. But when I can see them, when I'm playing, it feels very much like I'm playing, and I love having an audience. So it's great. I'm very much comfortable with that. It's when I'm not playing that it's actually the scariest for me. And I just, like I said, it was trusting Max, saying, just little things that he gave me and said, just, this is okay. It's reading correctly. And this is what you need to do. And I'll say my 13-year-old son, who loves theater, he does theater and dance and singing. And he came Saturday afternoon, and then it got cut short, and then he stayed Saturday night for it. And I said to him, what was your favorite part? And he said, yes. He just said yes, like everything, he loved it. And I said, give me an honest assessment. How'd you think Mom did? He says, well, I think, you could do this, this, and 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 that would help. But you're doing great, Mom.
You got notes.
I got notes from my 13-year-old. Mm-hmm. So, but he goes, no, you're doing good, Mom. So that was encouraging.
It is. And plus, I always think the most encouraging thing is when we can give a lot of notes. I think it means we're doing really well when there are a lot of notes to give, because it means that things are going so right that folks are like, oh, but if you just tweaked it. Sometimes I've seen runs where I'm like, oh, I have no notes. So I think it means that for both your 13-year-old and for the audiences, that it's really beautiful. And I appreciate the vulnerability that you just shared with us, that it's actually those moments of stillness, of not playing, that are still moments of sort of challenge and being seen. One of my favorite moments of your performance, in addition to the music, is actually when I don't think this will be a spoiler for those of you who have yet to share in the play, but when the poet tells that terrible joke about horses. And you laugh, Pam, and you're laughing right now.
I don't know why I love that joke.
You do, but it's so clear that you love that joke. And what I love about that moment too is it's the best of what theater is supposed to be, in a way, that sort of like honest, open exchange between two people. This like the acting teacher Sanford Meisner uses the phrase private to describe acting being private in public. And it feels like in that moment, as light as it is, like we're witnessing a lovely private moment, whether it's between Eric and Pam or between the poet and the muse. And we get let in on it. In the midst of,
he pulled me into more things as we've gone on. Oh. And it's, just him making eye contact with me makes me feel safe. It's like, okay, yeah, we're in this together. We're on this journey together. And I think, he said it's as much a comfort for him, but I don't know that he knows that, like, when I'm not playing, that I'm like sitting there just like terrified. What am I supposed to be doing? But I feel really engaged with it now, because he pulls me. He, when he connects with me, then I know what my role is and my job is. And I love that spot. And that was very organic in the rehearsal, that I just couldn't stop laughing. And Max is like, just keep it. Just keep
let it be.
Let it be. Because I'm going to look worse trying to not laugh.
Before I'm really excited for a little bit of, if you're still up for it, performance and sort of you were willing to dive into your Baroque world and talk a little bit about that instrument. Before we go there, perhaps team, those of us here in the Zoom room, before we segue to a different thing entirely, is there anything that you all in the world of Zoom want us to dig into about an Iliad, or what Pam has shared thus far, before we zig away from it a little bit? It doesn't have to be right now, but if you had a question or a thought that you want to share. I would be delighted to hear it. Ah, yes, Al is leaning forward with the Zoom.
Okay,
Hello.
Do
Al.
it.
It's
How are
nice to
you?
meet you. I just have to pick up on the relationship that you did establish with the poet, because I don't think I was aware of it early in the play, but as I became aware of it, reference both of you and to see the connection. And obviously, you know, when he came out into the audience in the beginning, pleading for his muse to please come, and I have to come again to see how you make your entrance because I missed it completely.
Yes, summer. Oh, no, this is fine.
That connection was just wonderful. It was a very enriching part of the production. And so thank you for having taken it so heartfully and done so well with it.
Thanks, Al. Thanks.
Oh, that's lovely. I am also just amused at how successful that classic piece of theatrical misdirection is. And it's even successful in the matinee performance when absolutely none of it is lighting. It's just all other things. So yes, do come back and check out the muse entrance.
I have to agree. Well, first of all, this is totally fabulous. Thank you so much for an amazing evening. A question, because you're, you know, in theater, you have to be very aware of cues. How was it hard for you to be kind of on point and understanding when you were supposed to be coming in?
That's actually a really good question. And I thought, you know, maybe Caitlin, I should talk a little bit about the score and things. So when I did get the score, I realized, Becky, that the setting and where we were going to be outside, that it was not going to be ideal to have a music stand and clips and paper flying around. And that I really should try and memorize this music, which is something that I haven't done in a long time. You know, you're in an orchestra and you have scores and you have music, and unless you're playing a concerto or something as a soloist, you typically, you're not spending a lot of effort memorizing. But I thought but I saw it as a good challenge for me. Like, I really wanted to do that. But you're right, Becky, I did have to know where to come in. And that's something that Jane had talked about. She had written in a lot of the cues and had used, but she was actually using the music. So I actually practically know the whole, I memorized the whole play practically. I told Eric, I sit there and talk with him underneath my mask, because I have most of the script memorized now. So you know, for me, my process of wanting to do it the way I felt was the most authentic and heartfelt to serve the text was to memorize the music and to know the script as much as I could possibly know it. So that was just something that I felt would serve the whole process the best.
Mm, that's incredible. Also, yeah.
I mean, that's a great reality. And I will say that it, as an audience member, as I was watching the interaction between you and the poet, it was, at first I kind of went, oh, they're acting. She's acting too. And it really added a flavor that I wasn't expecting. I was kind of thinking, okay, here's the music in the corner, but you weren't the music in the corner. You were the music in the corner that was very elaborate. So it was really, it was great. It was really well done.
You know, that's really, I have to give Max all the credit for that, because we had this one rehearsal where he said, you know, I want you to stay really engaged with Eric. And then afterwards, he's like, were you engaged at all? And I'm like, well, I was, but, you know, I was looking out of the top of my eyes. He said, it's not reading. And it was something as simple of him saying, sit up straight, keep your chin up here and do everything you were doing. And just telling, you know, like, I would never have thought of that. You know, I'm not an actress, you know, like just thinking of where to keep my head. And so it was these little things that he did that enabled it to read to the audience correctly with me not really knowing what I'm doing. So, except how to play the cello. So
I love that idea of legibility too, that like a director's role is also to, like, the thing might be happening, but is that thing legible to the audience, and having a director who's able to reflect that back to you. Yeah. I'm curious about the good person who is named Sue, but may or may not actually be Sue. You are unmuted. So I'm wondering, do you have something that you're wondering about or want to share?
No, I had the question that has just been answered about having the text and the score. It seemed, and I didn't see a music stand, and I was wondering how on earth did Pam pull all that off? So well answered, though. A beautiful job, no doubt.
Thank you. Yeah, the score, I can share a little bit with you. There is actually a score. It's seen some rain and dust and everything, but it's, you know, he actually, so, you know, I do have different pieces that I, you know, how Anthony, and I met Anthony for the first time, actually, right before the pandemic. He did our pre-concert lecture for our January 2020 chamber orchestra concert. And I had talked to him, but I hadn't met him in person. And so he did such an amazing job. And I thought, whoa, gosh, this is such a gift to have him here. But like, he had different things where he had a theme for Achilles. Achilles had a theme. And so it may not have been apparent to everyone, but I would take that theme, and at different times, I was actually repeating a lot of the same things over again, but with different things. Like it might be pizzicato, or it might be broken chords or not broken, or different ways, but there wasn't like an Achilles theme that sort of ran through. And then Hector had a theme that went through it. And then different, like there was a death in the battle scene. There was a theme for that. Andromache has a theme. And so he wove these really cleverly together in different ways. And of course, Jane and Max and Anthony had worked out where the actual text, you know, as you know, Caitlin, doesn't tell you. There's only like 2 spots where it says the muse does something. But for the most part, the muse could play anywhere. But they had spent a lot of time saying, where is the music going to actually serve the text? And had put it, so that had already been decided before I came into the process. And we changed and tweaked a little bit on either side, some places, but not a whole lot. And we added a few extras, like the sleep music that was new, that you had mentioned. We did add that, and we added a funeral rite that happens twice, where he says that death cut him short, and that happens twice, where we added that. And then the music that you hear played in the beginning and the end, that is actually Jane. That is not me. And I'm glad Max left it in. I was curious how that was going to work, but I felt that it really did serve the play to have Jane, because he calls for the muses. And so he had both of us. He had both of us there in a little bit of a way.
All this sounds like a borrowing from opera, you know, the use of themes for a personality in the opera is very, very important. And yeah, we caught it.
Yes, that it does have that sense. And it is sort of, in a way, some of the things that I'm doing are almost recitative, where it is what you would say, you know, I'm improvising. I'm taking a basic theme, but then I might be using a different bow technique, or a different fingering, or a different string technique to make a different sound. So it has sort of a operatic sense to it. Yeah, that's an interesting observation.
Yeah.
That's lovely. Dick and Sandra, did you have something that you want to share?
My question was sort of Elle's question, but by now, are your interactions with the poet scripted? Every night is a different night, of course, and there will be slight modifications, but you basically know where each of you is going throughout the play, I'd say, or I'm guessing, rather than having to come up with something brand new every single performance, would drive me crazy.
You know, Eric has a blocking that he's following, and I have a score that I'm following, and then we have a script that we're following. But I tell you, Dick, we are discovering new things. I felt Saturday night's performance was really rich. And I even said something to Eric. I said, you know, the way he tried, and you know, like, I'm not a theatrical person, but I think, you know, rhetorically, like, he tried new articulations and different things with his voice, which then were really inspiring to me, And I thought, oh, wow. And so I think through the process, we're discovering new things. So the weather has not been our friend, but we have discovered new things.
Yeah. I was about to say that the weather and the natural elements, I would say, probably add a bit more uncertainty than even usual into performances. And then I hear that there have been some very fortuitous bird arrivals and particular timings as well. So nature has been taking some things away due to the rain, but also it sounds as if giving some things as well.
It has, you know, in some ways, like the beautiful sunsets have been so inspiring when we've had them. And, you know, I love the certain timing when he talks about Achilles' shield and he's describing the shield and he talks about the sun and the moon and the sun's just going down and he's looking up to the sky. And then other times when, you know, when Achilles says, enough, I've had enough. And he's looking up to and it's already gotten dark. And so the elements have been beautiful in some ways, but they've been really challenging. I think the most challenging for me, Caitlin, was at the Tuesday before opening, and we were down to about 42 degrees by the time we finished. I have never tried to play a cello, even any kind of instrument in 42 degrees, and just sitting, and it was, I didn't think I could get through it, but you know, we discovered so much through that because you're pushing through, you know, and I feel like that was even a breakthrough night, even though it was really difficult, you know, for both of us. You know, Eric had to deal with a lot of wind, and there was one performance where the wind was so strong, like my bow didn't want to do it. There was just the right angle that it was knocking the bow, but you know, you go with it and just discover what you can.
Yeah.
So.
And I feel like one of the effects of this COVID time has also been that, like, I remember on that Tuesday dress rehearsal that started so late because it rained and then it was dark, and, you know, that we were sort of standing out in the rain, the production team, and this sort of very strange feeling of all of that urgency, which I feel like I've internalized of like 15 or 20 years in the theater of like, this must happen. And I was feeling stress, but I was also separate from this stress because there was also just this enormous gift of, wow, it's been 15 months since I've had the opportunity to stand in shared space with other theater artists, debating whether or not we could even the fact that we were able to have a conversation about whether or not dress rehearsal would be able to happen felt like a gift, you know, and so the balance of this time where it's like being, Brecht talks about like the alienation, right? I'm holding things outside myself more now and able to see the good in things, even as you're absolutely right. There are also really difficult things that you're playing in cold, or it's raining, or we get right to a climactic moment and the performance has to stop because of lightning. So there's this push and this pull. Absolutely.
I will say to you and to your whole team and everyone at TheaterWorks and everyone who's here, it has been an amazing gift to me to be part of this. I mean, to be, like you're saying, I'm thrilled to be playing. I'm thrilled to be, you know, doing what I do, which is make music, to reach people, to touch people through music. What a gift. I couldn't be more grateful.
Yeah.
Really.
Oh, thank you. Ooh, Paul, yes.
We've now seen you playing in 3 different environments, the orchestra, Parish House Baroque, and now with TheaterWorks. And in each case, we've seen you with 3 different instruments. How is that for you as a performer playing?
Yeah. And that might segue well to me getting my cello. So,
You created the perfect segue.
Thank you, Paul. So, I mean, I was raised on, you know, what every student learns is just a regular, what we consider now a modern cello. Get my cello here. I'm going to take my headset off, Caitlin, so that some sound will come through.
Pam, in taking your headset off, you might have to switch your mic input. While Pam's figuring that out, those of us who are not Pam may wish to remute ourselves, because otherwise, because Pam has taken off her headset, we might begin to experience some pretty funky feedback if we are not muted. Not yet. Yes,
Can you hear me
Pam,
now?
I can hear you now.
Okay.
It's not a Zoom meeting unless we ask that question.
Okay. Can you hear my instrument? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So if this gets, Caitlin, just cut me off if things get, and it doesn't work. Okay.
I'll do this if it
Okay.
gets dire.
I'm gonna back up my thing here. So, hi, I'm Pam, and this is my cello. This is my baby. I call her Chaconne, and she was made in 1892 in France. And she is set up what you would call a modern cello. So it's what you would see in any major symphony orchestra. I have metal strings, a bridge, tailpiece, and an end pin that you would all see, and that's what I would hold it with. And this is my baby. So it's just, I could go on and on with Bach, but this is what I used most of my life. It's what I obviously I've had other cellos, but a cello set up like this, my regular cello. So then when I met Elisa Wicks, and that's a whole nother long story, who is an early music specialist, I got interested in the world of early music, or what they call historically informed performance practice, or historically informed performance. As we all know, there was no recordings of what music sounded like or looked like before when would maybe the first early 1900s, late 1800s. So the only thing they have to go by of what music looked like maybe during the Baroque period, the 1600s to 1700s, treatises, writings, paintings, drawings. So a lot of it is best guess of this is what happened during that time. But what they do know is from the treatises and pictures is that the instruments were different, and they've evolved over time. And the instruments you see in a symphony orchestra today are not the same cello that you would have seen back then. And at one point, the cello didn't even exist. It came from the viol family, and they started out as viols. And when the first, what they called violoncello actually means little viol. From a big viol, this was a small viol. So I don't have an end pin. I hold it between my legs, and so it's a bit more upright. The strings are different. The strings are made of gut, and the bridge is different. My fingerboard is not as different as it should be. It should be a little bit shorter. The bass bar inside is a little bit thinner. So it's a much more organic sound. As instruments evolved, and I could talk about this for hours, and we don't want to do that. So as symphonies, as instruments were needing to project in concert halls, more sound was needed. So more angle was given to and this happened to violins as well. You needed more angle and more tension on the strings and metal strings to get projection. And so the Baroque instruments would have just been used in a chamber setting. So I don't think you can hear a little bit of a difference over Zoom, but it's It's a warmer sound. It's a more organic sound. Another big difference is the bows. This is my modern bow. And they're really designed for sustain, so that you can sustain the same level of pressure on the strings from here to here, whereas back in the Baroque, they didn't need that. And so the bows were more weighted. So this is my Baroque bow. And so it's very different. And I hold it here so that there's more emphasis on, it's more dance-like, more emphasis on sort of on beats in terms of, instead of sustained sounds. As music became more romantic and you got into pieces that needed more sustain. I don't know if I'm explaining that correctly, but so this is my Baroque cello, and this cello was made in 1754. So that's my other baby. So and then that's my regular cello. So then, you know, this electric instrument, those of you who've seen it, it's almost just a fingerboard. And the pickup, what they call the pickup, because it's like an electric guitar, I'm plugged into the system, is on the bridge. And I don't have as much dynamic range. So the more pressure I put on it, I don't really get more sound. So the sound engineer that TheatreWorks has enlisted has been really important in this production to help me give me more dynamic range. It's laid out the same, except like I said, I have a fifth string, so I keep going for the wrong string. Like, it's not the right string. So things are in a little bit different place for me, and I had to sort of mentally kind of get used to that. And they're a little closer together because there's a fifth string on the fingerboard where there's normally four. And just getting used to, the other big difference for me is when you play an instrument, a violin or anything, I move with my instrument, you know? I'm holding it with my legs. And so if I want, you know, more, you know, I use my whole body, and I've got this instrument that's on a stand and I have no contact with it except my hands. So that was really something to get used to. So I had a sort of a learning curve, Paul. I got to do a lot of practicing at home on that instrument until we locked it on the stage.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that the fact that because Baroque performance is a passion, or sorry, what is the exact phrase? Historically informed performance, was that the right? Because historically informed performance, in addition to modern performance of cello, they're both passions for you. Do you think that helped a bit with the fact that you were at least accustomed to switching between two different instruments and then the introduction of the third? Or is the third with the electric cello so different that the oscillation between the Baroque and the modern doesn't really compare?
That's a really good question. I don't think I would have been able to make the transition to that instrument as well if I didn't already know how to, because like this, I hold a lot straighter up and down versus that one has a more angle. I think that really did help. It helped a lot to have that. And it was actually a really interesting thing here. You know, I consider, you know, myself a Baroque cellist, and I'm playing this piece that's sort of timeless, that goes back to this ancient time, and yet we're doing it in this modern setting. And there was this interesting, I felt like I brought an interesting perspective, at least. I don't know whether it translated, but I at least felt internally that there was this timelessness that I could bring to some of the music. Yeah. Even though it's a very modern score, you know.
That makes a sense to me, because also the play is playing with a large sweep of history, and part of the way that it plays with a large sweep of history is calling out very specific moments in time. That it calls out at a certain moment World War I, or it calls out at another moment, very specific conflict. I don't want to give away too much, but very specific conflict across time. So this idea of one of the ways we address this timeless for all time quality is also by dipping into the very, very specific the qualities of a particular time. Holding those two things makes sense to me, so that you can bring a timelessness, in part because you're thinking about performance at a very specific historical moment in music.
And another thing I'd love to share is that about, was it 7 years ago, I had the privilege of being part of I'm trying to think, it was a presentation at Colorado College where, and I can't, the name is slipping my mind. I think, what is it, Steve Galloway had come to talk about his book, The Cellist of Sarajevo. And that book was based on the real life, it was a fictional account of the real life cellist of Sarajevo. And if any of you know, or just Google the cellist of Sarajevo, and I'm not going to try and pronounce his name because I will not do it honor. But when Bosnia and Herzegovina was under siege, a cellist went out into the middle of where it was being bombed with his cello and played Albinoni's Adagio, which is a Baroque piece, over and over again. And he did that for, I don't remember how many days. And the AP, they caught it on the newswire and got a picture of it. And so then David Wilde, who's an English composer, wrote a piece for Yo-Yo Ma called The Cellist of Sarajevo, which is written for solo cello. And I got to play that piece when they did the lecture on the book at Colorado College. And so studying that piece and working that piece and learning that piece. And so every time he talks about Bosnia, Herzegovina and Sarajevo, it's really rough for me. So, because I did a lot of research on that cellist and read some books about the siege.
Yeah. Oh, that's so, because I know that Max's original, as things like these things loop back and things return, and some of Max's original imagery that he collected as a director to inspire the March 2020 production, The Cellist of Sarajevo, was among the images that he pulled, the sense of juxtaposition. And what that makes me think of is that I was recalling when Max and Eric were with us in college. I took a course on civil conflict throughout history. And one of the things that our professor had us read, he was a scholar of the former Yugoslavia, was a passage of text about women, about inter-village fighting and women involved in the village and being up on their housetops and throwing tiles down to protect themselves. And then he juxtaposed it with a text from Thucydides' History of the Peloponnesian War, and a text of almost the exact same description, women atop a house defending their homes with pieces of the architecture from this armed conflict in their city. And just that, what you're speaking to now reminds me, just these, part of what an Iliad speaks to is these repetitions across time, problems that we speak to, problems of civil conflict and violence as new or somehow different, but actually it's these repetitions and these cycles. And what you've described musically, Pam, with this cellist just reinforces that for me. And
it's
the
interesting how music plays a role in conflict. And Max had even asked me for some music, perhaps to consider for pre-music for the show, and I had sent him some things. And it's another interesting connection in all this is that Jane, the chamber orchestra, had a program on March 4th, right before the shutdown, right before we had a concert that weekend, but we had a special program we were doing called Interrupted, which was music of the Holocaust. We were exploring composers who had perished in the Holocaust, whose music was lost, who had died very young, and some pieces that were actually written in concentration camps. And Jane was actually a part of that program. And so it was an interesting connection. She was part of the Veronica String Quartet, who had contributed to a part of that program. So. And there is so much music that has been written about conflict and
Mhm.
in during conflict, and
Mhm.
is it, is it healing? Is it, at times, am I healing for the poet? I think there's two parts in there where I feel like the music is actually a relief for him. Like, finally, I can rest, and I can just sit in this music and let this sort of be a balm for his soul. And there's in two spots in particular, and I know you know what I'm talking about, Caitlin, because I don't
Yes,
want to mess it up
I do.
either.
Yeah.
But at other times, I'm part of his dialogue. I'm part of what he's doing. And at other times, I'm pushing him, like, oh no, don't stop, don't stop the story. But
Yeah.
I think it has different roles in the show.
That's beautiful. So many more. Pam, I know that you said you could talk about Baroque performance forever, and I feel like I could talk about. I want to dig into, but good people. We're almost at the end of our time together. Is there anyone who's not Pam or myself who wishes to share something or ask something or say something before we go ahead to the rest of our evening? Oh, Becky's leaning forward, but also Thelma has
Quick
unmuted.
question of the other musicians that are part of the performance, and just speak a little bit more about kind of what they're at. I mean, that whole crew behind the scenes, if you will.
Right, so we do have a sound engineer who is handling all the sound, and he's my best friend.
You and Philip.
He makes me sound good. So we have a sound engineer, and then the other music that you hear is recorded, and that is actually the music that was recorded last spring by Jane to be used in the original production. And so you've got Jane. The other
and then you have the pre-show music as well, which y'all, I was there when Max asked Pam whether she could marinate on some other pieces for pre-show. And I've never seen, it was like a child at a birthday party. Like someone had just given Pam the biggest gift by asking her what music should be played pre-show. But yes, we do have a sound engineer who both works with Pam's cello and then also makes sure that Eric, who is amplified, that they can be heard in concert with each other, which we don't always have in theater works.
That was fabulous. I was so impressed that the sound was really, really important, and it went off really well.
Yes. All credit also to the good students of the theater and dance program who performed outside on the lawn in the fall, no exit. And I felt like they taught us a lot about what would be necessary. Thelma, did you have a question or a thought to share?
Well, I was just going to say, it seemed like it evolved as we sat there and we realized more and more how important the muse was, because in the beginning, we were so taken with Eric, and then the muse became more and more important. It was wonderful. We loved it.
Thanks, Thelma.
That's lovely. It's true that this production is so good at sort of offering something and making it seem like that's all you need, and then another layer is added on, and then another layer is added on, and then the whole feels very ornate and complex and necessary, even though at the end it's still quite simple. It's still two humans and a beautiful instrument and a handful of lights and the sunset. It's amazing.
I mean, I would have loved nothing more than to have played this on, in an indoor space on a modern cello. But
true, the
journey to have played this score is, well, first of all, just a real privilege, and Anthony and everything he put into this. The journey to learn this instrument, to be in that environment, to deal with the elements, an amazing group of people. Eric, just such a gift. It's been great. I can say I did this thing.
Pam, we are so grateful to you so very much. And all of us here on the call in this Zoom room, I'm really grateful to you all as well. Oh, yes, Becky's doing some applause. Yay. For coming, for braving the elements, or just streaming, or just being with us here tonight. it just, I continue to be amazed how filled up I am by these conversations. And so I just appreciate all of you so very much. Okay, good people. We shall release each other into our evenings. If you haven't seen an Iliad, really make time for it. You can always ask me how to make that happen, and I'd be delighted to share how we stream or watch in person. But Pam, I will see you tomorrow night. I am with an Iliad all weekend, so I get to listen and enjoy 5 more times, which I feel so grateful for.
And the weather looks beautiful this weekend. So.
Don't you dare say that. But it does. The weather does look beautiful, so we have high hopes. Knock on our real wood bookshelf.
Thank
You're
you.
doing for the arts community. It's wonderful.
It's a privilege. All right, lovely people, let us wave each other off until I end the meeting for all. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.